Chapter 11. UDCA Euros Doxyolic acid. The doctor lifted up a small glass bottle to the light and swirled a dark greenish liquid around inside. It curled to its side of the bottle in a thick sludge. This is what we milk from the bears. Liquid money, he smiled, showing his gold tooth. Bear bile to you. I rested the yard broom against the wall and wiped sweat from my forehead. I'd been up early, waiting for Ashnag to open the red gate at first light. I'd cleaned and scrubbed beneath all the cage and swept the yard before the doctor had arrived. I squinted at the bottle he held in his hand. Bear bile? The doctor pushed his fingers into my stomach right underneath my ribs. It comes from here, from the gallbladder. Do you know what I'm talking about, mountain boy? I took a step back and nodded. I had seen gallbladders of the pigs at the slaughter. I had seen the small round sacks near the liver filled with greenish liquid, but I couldn't think how to get bile from bears. Agnos, the doctor shouted. It's time we milk our first bear. I watched Asnog wheel a large cart into the building. The bears became restless. They turned in their cages, pressing against the far bars. I could see the whites of their eyes. Some panted in deep moans, hollering sounds. I could feel my own heart thumping deep inside my chest. I could feel their fear, too. The doctor slammed the metal bar against the cage. We'll start with this one. The bear inside shrieked, its ears flat against its head, its lips pulled back, showing a line of broken teeth. Asnok sneered the dog with a rope on a pole while the doctor drew a syringe of clear liquid from a vial and injected it into the flask of the bear. There, said the doctor, and now we wait for him to sleep. I watched the bear. For a while he stared at us. Then his head began to droop. He stared at the ground, saliva dripping from his mouth. He began to sway, and his front legs trembled. The doctor lit a cigarette and breathed deeply, filling his lungs. He puffed the pale gray smoke into the air. What do you know about bear farming, boy? I watched the bear sink onto its forepaws, and the doctor leaned in closer, his face next to mine. I could smell the smoke around his mouth. He doesn't know much, does he? Asked Nug. Maybe they don't teach them anything in the mountains. The bear's hide legs began to buckle. The doctor paced around his cage. In China, there are farms with 2,000 bears. Imagine that, mountain boy. He took another puff of his cigarette. One day I will have 2,000 bears. I had 40 bears on my farm in Vietnam before it was closed. They don't like bio farming there anymore. It is so much easier here in Laos. He rubbed invisible money between his fingers. It's easier to bend the rules. The bear's back legs gave way and he collapsed onto the cage floor, his neck crooked against the corner. Asnag poked him with the end of the pole, and when he didn't move, Asnag opened the cage and hauled the bear out into the cart. Asnag pulled the cart and then I followed him, and the doctor to a small room beside the office. I hadn't noticed the room before. It was windowless. A small sink stood in one corner. A table with a machine that looked like a tiny TV was placed against the wall. There were flasks and bottles and tubes scattered on the table. The table had a green stain and was crushed with dirt. Asnag brought the cart next to him and pulled the bear onto its back, tying its legs to the four corners of the cart. The doctor switched on the screen and a fuzzy black and white image appeared. This is an ultrasound machine, he said, and this is the probe. He held up the round plastic end of a wire attached to the machine. It lets me see inside the bear. I stared at the screen while the doctor smeared a clear gel onto the probe. He ran it against the bear's belly. The picture on the screen broke up the pattern of white and black. This is the liver, said the doctor, pointing to the white fuzz on the screen. And this, he pointed to the round black circle in the center, is the gallbladder. Asnog handed him a long needle, and I watched the doctor pierce the skin. The bear twitched. He grunted. I noticed he licked his lips, but I couldn't help thinking he was feeling all this, even though he couldn't move. The doctor guided the needle, and I watched the white line of the needle of the screen enter the gallbladder. The doctor pushed a fine metal wire along the needle and pulled it back out and licked the end. The doctor nodded with satisfaction. Bear bile. Asnag attached a long clear tube to the needle end to pump, and watched the sludgy liquid trail up the tube and grip into a glass bottle on the table. The doctor handed back in his chair. In China, they don't use ultrasound machines. They make a hole in the belly and let the bile drip out. But I use the ultrasounds because I'm a real doctor. He looked at me and then at Asnog. You have to be very clever to be a doctor, isn't that right, Asnog? Asnog shuffled on his feet and nodded. The doctor swirled the bottle as if it would encourage more bile to flow. So, I know all about bear bile. It's good for you. It cures all ills. Sore throats, headaches, sores, bruises, cancer, maybe even death. He laughed and looked across at Asnog. Some men think it helps them find a wife. Asnog pulled his shirt down across his stomach. When all the bile had drained, the doctor pulled the needle from the bear and poured the bile into small bottles. He swirled the sludge at the base with water and swung it back, finishing it in one gulp. He pulled a bitter face and slammed the bottle on the table. Funny thing is, he said, a smirk rose on the side of his face, there is no need to take the bile back from these bears. UDCA can make it in the laboratories, but I don't tell my customers that. Besides, they wouldn't want to know that. They think it's more potent if it's from a real bear. The doctor milked 4 bears that day. When he finished, Asnog gave me a mix of water and rice and water to feed them all. I slid the metal trays into the cage and they pushed their nose up and slurped up the food as if they hadn't seen any for weeks. Only Mama Bear didn't eat. She lay hunched on the bars of her cage. Her eyes were dull and sunken. She grunted at every end of her breath. Her fur was matted and stuck in clumps on her skin. She was watching me, following my every move. I stepped closer and crouched beside her. My face was so close to hers, only the cage bars between us. She was a wild animal, but when she looked at me with her eyes, it was as if she could see into me. I felt as if she let me see inside of her, beyond her pain, into the deep forests and mountains of her soul. She saw paws through the bears towards my hand. The toes of her paws stretched. I took her paws in my hand. She gently squeezed my fingers. I couldn't look at her. I closed my eyes and turned away. Mountain boy! The doctor was watching me. This isn't a petting zoo. I don't pay you to cuddle the bears. I'm sorry, I said, but this bear is sick. The doctor pierced in at Mama Bear. He spat on the ground. She is lazy. One thing I don't like is a lazy worker. Make sure you are here tomorrow and I will show you how we dry out the bile to make pills and powders. I watched the doctor drive from the yard. Asnog ushered me out and locked the gates. He turned and handed me the keys. Open up tomorrow and make sure you clean the bears before I arrive. I took the keys and slipped them around my neck. Asnog swung his leg over his bike and pedaled away into the slow lane of traffic. Across the road, I could see Cam and his friends. They stood back, leaning against the wire fence, their hands pushed deep inside their pockets. They were pretending to be talking, but they were watching me like hawks. I couldn't care what they thought of me. I imagined them and stepped between the parked cars. I ignored them and stepped between the parked cars out onto the road. My mind was flooded with the image of Mama Bear. I didn't see the motorbike. It slammed into my side. Time slowed down. I saw the shocked look of the motorcyclist through the visor of his helmet as he tried to keep control. I saw the world spin and spin and spin as I bounced across the hood of cars and the blackness of the tarmac as the road flew up to meet me.